In times of noise, clarity matters. A commentary by James Stanislaus.
There is an old saying that if it walks like a duck, it looks like a duck, and it quacks like a duck, then it is probably a duck. The saying is not about certainty. It is about patterns. It reminds us that when the same conduct is repeated often enough, reasonable people stop treating each occurrence as an isolated incident and begin to recognize what they are actually looking at. That brings me to Dr. Ernest Hilaire. The controversy surrounding the Arsenal agreement is not really about football, you know. It is about credibility. It is about whether we have any reason left to accept Dr. Hilaire's assurances when experience has taught us, history has taught us repeatedly and painfully that when this minister hides information behind official sounding explanations, he is hiding something he knows would cause outrage. Somebody is benefiting who should not be. Somebody is being paid who should not be paid. That is what this pattern points to. And that is why his excuse for not disclosing the financial details of the Arsenal deal insults our intelligence. You see, when asked by the media to disclose those details, Dr. Hilaire did not say that Arsenal had prohibited disclosure. He argued that revealing the figures could influence future investors and future agreements. In the same breath, he insisted that the figures being circulated publicly were wrong. That position creates an obvious trap. If the figures are wrong, but we cannot be told the correct figures, then the people of Saint Lucia are simply being asked to trust the minister's word again. Now, Rwanda publicly disclosed the value of its Arsenal sponsorship. Emirates has publicly disclosed its Arsenal sponsorship arrangements. If those governments and corporations could be transparent with their stakeholders about their Arsenal arrangements, what is so different about Saint Lucia? Is this really Arsenal's position? Or is it the government of Saint Lucia's decision? Why would transparency damage future investments here, but apparently not elsewhere? These are not hostile questions. These are the obvious questions any engaged people would ask Dr. Hilaire, and Dr. Hilaire has not answered them. And experience has taught us why. Every time this minister has hidden behind an official sounding explanation, what eventually emerged was something he had reason to hide. Not an oversight, not miscommunication, something that would have caused outrage had we known it from the beginning. But to understand why so many of us reject his explanation, we must go back further, because the Arsenal deal is not where our skepticism began. It is merely where our skepticism has arrived. Let's start with Caribbean Galaxy. We asked a straightforward question. How many citizenship by investment files had been allocated to the Canals Bay development? Dr. Hilaire's response was remarkable. He said he would need to seek Caribbean Galaxy's permission before disclosing that information. Let me tell you, a minister of government of the government of Saint Lucia telling the people of Saint Lucia that he needed a private developer's consent before answering questions about a program that belongs to the people of Saint Lucia. And more than 1 year has passed, and we were never told whether permission was sought, whether it was granted, or whether it was refused. And then, because it always comes to light, then the contract surfaced. The signed agreement between the government of Saint Lucia and Caribbean Galaxy with Dr. Ernest Hilaire's own signature on it. The same minister who told us he needed a private developer's permission to speak had signed the document himself. That contract revealed an allocation of 5,000 CIP files. The statutory minimum investment under the program meant those allocations represented at least $1 billion attached to a project valued at approximately $400 million. $1 billion against a $400 million project. Dr. Hilaire knew the answer to our question from the very first day we asked it. And that gap, $600 million, $600 million between what the project was worth and what was allocated is where the real question lives. Where does that difference go? Who benefits from an arrangement of that scale? Those are the questions a transparent minister would have invited us to ask from the beginning. Dr. Hilaire instead told us he needed permission to speak. That single fact reframes everything that followed. Then came the GPH agreement. We heard much about investment. We heard much about modernization and the transformation of the Castries Harbor and the Soufrière waterfront. What received far less attention was what we were actually giving away. Under the terms as publicly described, approximately $10 of every $12.50 collected in cruise passenger head tax. Now that's US dollars. Now that's $10 out of every $12.50. That is roughly 80% would go to GPH. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years, for 30 years with an option for a further 10-year extension. 80% of our cruise head tax gone, poof, for 40 years. St. Lucia, that is not a detail, that is the deal. And it was not placed front and center for the people to wait. We have to ask ourselves, why? Because a minister confident that the people would approve of those terms would have led with them. He would have told us about that from the beginning if he was confident about the deal. You only bury what you know you cannot survive in the light. And let me repeat that. You only bury what you know cannot survive the light. And then there is the Jufali affair. We were told that Walid Jufali's appointment would bring investment, including a diabetes research facility that has never materialized. Monsieur Mo Nupawe. But let me be plain about what actually happened here, because the details matter, and I want you to listen carefully. Walid Jufali, or Walid Jufali, however his name was pronounced, was a billionaire. His marriage had collapsed, and his ex-wife was coming for her share of a multi-billion-dollar estate. Now, they were in England, in the UK, so it was a multi-billion-pound estate. To protect that fortune, he needed diplomatic immunity. And St. Lucia provided him with it. But here is what makes this story different from a simple case of a government making a bad appointment. Dr. Ernest Hilaire was at the time St. Lucia's High Commissioner in London. That position made him St. Lucia's representative to the International Maritime Organization, the IMO. That seat was Hilaire's. He gave it up and handed it directly to Walid Jufali. So the question is not merely why Jufali was appointed. The question is why Dr. Hilaire surrendered his own position to a billionaire who needed diplomatic immunity to protect his fortune from a divorce settlement. That is the question. What was the arrangement? What did Dr. Hilaire receive in exchange for stepping aside? Because Walid Jufali did not work one single day in that position. He did not attend one meeting of the IMO, not one. He was not there to represent Saint Lucia. He was there to protect himself. And the seat he used to do it was the one Dr. Ernest Hilaire had been sitting in. And then there's more. Kute. Then the Auditor General documented what happened next. An account, a bank account, connected to the St. Lucia's High Commission in London had been operating in direct contravention of the Finance Act of St. Lucia. Plainly put, it was illegal. That bank account was illegal as per our laws in St. Lucia. The Ministry of Finance did not know that bank account existed. The Auditor General did not know it existed until the scandal broke. And into that account, Walid Jufali deposited £66,500, pounds sterling. And the signatories on that account were Dr. Walid Jufali and Dr. Ernest Hilaire. You got that? And from that same account, thousands of pounds were paid directly to Dr. Ernest Hilaire himself. Now let us think about this carefully. Dr. Ernest Hilaire was not a junior clerk who stumbled into public life without knowing the rules. Before he became St. Lucia's High Commissioner in London, he had served as a permanent secretary in the government of St. Lucia, one of the most senior administrative positions in the public service, a role whose entire purpose is to ensure that government business is conducted properly, legally, and accountably. And even after that, he had served as Chief Executive Officer, CEO of West Indies Cricket, managing a major regional organization with all the financial governance that position demands. So this is a man who has spent his entire career inside institutions built on rules, procedures, and accountability. He did not arrive at the High Commission in London as a stranger to the Finance Act. He arrived as someone who had spent decades living inside exactly the kind of financial oversight framework that account was designed to circumvent. He knew all of that, and he still opened the account, which means the account was not opened out of ignorance. It was not a procedural oversight. It was not a mistake at all. It was a choice, St. Lucia. It was a choice to open this illegal account. A deliberate choice to move money outside the system, specifically designed to track where money goes and who receives it. So the question is not whether Dr. Hilaire knew the correct procedures. He knew them better than most. The question is why he chose to bypass them. Why did £66,500 deposited by a billionaire who needed a diplomatic passport and diplomatic immunity need to stay hidden from the Ministry of Finance? What would the Ministry of Finance have asked if they had seen it? What would the Auditor General have found if they had known where to look? And why did thousands of pounds from that same hidden account end up paid directly to Dr. Ernest Hilaire himself? St. Lucia, these are not complicated questions. They have a simple answer. The money moved the way it moved because that was the only way it could move without leaving a trail that the people of St. Lucia were never supposed to follow. Each of these instances or incidents, viewed alone, can be argued over. We can debate over them. But we are no longer viewing them alone. We are viewing them together as a pattern. And the pattern is not one of carelessness or poor communication. It is one of deliberate concealment And deliberate concealment in public life, when public money is involved, has a name. After this record, no one should be surprised that people believe the information is being withheld because its disclosure will be politically damaging. Somebody is benefiting who should not be. Dr. Hilaire knows what that information contains. He knows why it is being hidden, and no volume of official sounding explanations and excuses changes what the record shows. That is why the Arsenal explanation has been met with the response it deserves. So when Dr. Hilaire says disclosure could affect future investors, we hear something else entirely. We hear another request to accept assurances without verification, another appeal to trust me, when what we are asking for is evidence. And we remember that the last time we accepted the appeal to trust me, the truth was sitting in a signed contract that the minister himself had signed. Think about that. Just think about that. Dr. Hilaire frequently expresses frustration at the speculation that surrounds these matters. But speculation is the natural consequence of secrecy. When a government withholds what the people reasonably expect to know, we ask why. We wonder what the missing information would reveal. We remember what happened the last time we were told to wait, to trust, to be patient, after Caribbean Galaxy, after GPH, after Jufali. Our suspicion is not just reasonable, it is necessary. It is the only rational response to a record this consistent. No democratic government should expect blind trust from the people it serves. Ministers do not spend their own money. They exercise public authority on our behalf. Transparency is therefore not a courtesy to be extended at a minister's discretion. It is a basic obligation, one that cannot be replaced by reassurances, however smoothly delivered, from the same hands that signed the contract and then claimed they needed permission to speak about it. From the same hands that gave up a diplomatic seat for a billionaire and then received thousands of pounds from an illegal contract they both signed. An illegal account, they both signed. And so we return to the duck. We have watched it walk. We have heard it quack. We have seen the same footprints again and again across every major controversy of the past several years. Dr. Ernest Hilaire may insist that each situation is different, that each explanation is reasonable, that each request for trust is justified. But the people of Saint Lucia are no longer evaluating each incident in isolation. We have read the pattern. We have seen the signature. We know what deliberate concealment looks like, and we know what it is usually concealing. When the man asking you for your trust, is the same man who signed the contract he told you he could not find, who vacated his own diplomatic seat for a billionaire seeking protection, and who received thousands of pounds from an illegal account funded by that same billionaire, you no longer need to guess what kind of bird you are looking at. So if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then St. Lucia, it is probably a duck. I want to thank you for listening. May God bless you and your family, and may He continue to bless our beautiful island, St. Lucia. One love, my people.